There are many notorious leaders of the 20th and 21st century, and Gaddafi is definitely a person which sticks out amongst those, not only because of his domestic politics, but the way his reign came to an end. I want to focus in this video most and foremost on Gaddafi's downfall and all the possible mistakes he committed, which lead to his capturing and after 40 years of reign to his final execution on the 20th October 2011.
Sorry, you have annoyed me in England, therefore you got me no chance to learn English.
I also want to issue a disclaimer regarding this topic. I want to treat this work as neutral as possible. I am not attempting to judge any groups or people in this video and frame them in any bad or good shape because of my own personal opinion. My judgment is irrelevant. This video represents historical accurate facts, not more, not less, and any criticism is fairly appreciated. When Gaddafi took over as the de facto dictator of Libya, it was the year 1969, and he was 27 years old. Not only did he achieve to overthrow the king of Libya without any bloodshed, he did this at a very young age, making him one of the youngest dictators ever to live, establishing a very long reign and time period important for this country's history. He is a controversial figure in world history because on one side it is said that he supported terrorist activities like the Lockerbie attack in 1988 or the Berlin discotheque bombing in 1986. On the other side, he brought prosperity to his country, maintaining the highest Human Development Index rating of all African countries across decades through introducing social programs in his country, which helped tremendously in this matter. And those programs are what Gaddafi is most praised for today. His reign came to an end when he got brutally assassinated on October 20th, 2011 in Sirte, Libya, and with his death, Libya came down with him, being ruled by different rebel groups until this day. What has Gaddafi done allowing rebels to kill him after he successfully held his position for over 40 years? And what strategic decisions possibly brought his downfall after such a long time? One of the first things Gaddafi did after he came to power was the nationalizing of Libya's oil reserves. What this means is the following. Before Gaddafi came to power, Exxon, today known as Esso, Royal Dutch Shell, BP, Gulf Oil, and Texaco were involved in the oil trade. Exxon, Gulf Oil, and Texaco belonged to the USA. BP and Royal Dutch Shell belonged to the United Kingdom. Remember this, it will be important later. Now that Gaddafi came to power, he raised his demands on the cuts regarding the profits and also raised the oil production costs. This behavior of his started in 1970. Shortly after this, he created the National Oil Corporation, and year after year the demands risen. Over time, he took over all the control of the oil production in the country, which was in 1974. What many people don't know today is the fact that Libya has the biggest oil reserves of whole Africa, 6 billion tons to be exact. And Gaddafi took 5 years to kick out the American and British corporations out of his country, and in the process denied them access to the oil and also the money. To be fair, he used this profit partially to invest into his country. Free healthcare, free housing, free education, women's rights, the list goes on. That doesn't change the fact that the relations to the USA and United Kingdom became sour very early and paved the path to a very problematic relationship with the big players around the globe, mainly the USA.
Does the possibility of an attack on you by maybe people here, but all people outside, does that worry you?
No, I am not a friend. I am not afraid. Sorry, I am not afraid of this. Doesn't matter.
As already mentioned, the relations to the Western world, and especially the USA, already gone sour by the 80s. And in this time period, there have been several terrorist attacks, especially for 2 Gaddafi got blamed. And that is why heavy sanctions have been brought up against Libya. This is something the country struggled with for the following years to come. The first major event was the Berlin discotheque bombing in 1986. On April 5th, a bomb exploded at the La Belle nightclub in West Berlin, which was a popular spot for U.S. military personnel and also civilians. The attack killed 3 people. Among those have been 2 U.S. soldiers and 1 Turkish woman. Also, 229 others have been injured, including 79 U.S. soldiers. As you can already guess, the bombing was seen as an attack on U.S. personnel in Europe. Gaddafi's involvement in all of this is the following. The U.S. government accused Libya of being behind the bombing, claiming that Libyan agents were responsible for it. Not only this, but the U.S. intelligence pointed specifically to Libyan involvement in supporting a Palestinian group called Abu Nidal Organization, or short ANO, which was believed to have carried out the attack on Gaddafi's orders as part of a broader strategy to target American interests in Europe. In response to the bombing, the back-then President Ronald Reagan ordered Operation El Dorado Canyon on April 15, 1986, a series of airstrikes aimed at Libyan targets. The airstrikes especially focused on Libyan military sites in Tripoli and Benghazi, including Gaddafi's compound. While Gaddafi survived, his adopted daughter Hana was killed in the attack. All this increased Libya's isolation from the international community, even though Gaddafi denied direct involvement and never admitted to it. Shortly after this event, 2 years to be precise, an aircraft exploded. This was the Lockerbie attack on December 21, 1988. Pan Am Flight 103 exploded over Lockerbie, Scotland, which was a Boeing 747. Responsible for this was a bomb hidden in a suitcase, breaking the aircraft into pieces. 270 people died, 259 passengers and crew on board, and 11 further people on the ground in Lockerbie. It was one of the deadliest terrorist attacks against civilians before 9/11. But who was behind all of it this time? The investigative team, with contribution from mainly Scotland, the UK, USA, and also Germany, determined that the bomb was placed inside a suitcase likely transferred from a connecting flight in Frankfurt, Germany. After a long investigation, Libyan intelligence agents were accused of orchestrating this attack. Initially, Libya denied responsibility, with Gaddafi calling the accusations of Western propaganda, but this time things got more serious. In 1991, 2 Libyan nationals were charged with the bombing, and again, international sanctions were imposed on Libya, which happened in 1992 after Gaddafi refused to hand them over. The pressure grew year after year, and in 1999, Gaddafi finally agreed to extradite the mentioned suspects to be tried in a Scottish court in the Netherlands. In addition to this, in 2003, Libya officially admitted responsibility and paid $2.7 billion in compensation to victims' families, even if Gaddafi never accepted personally the blame. Because this was part of a diplomatic deal, the Western sanctions imposed because of those terrorist attacks got lifted, which included mainly an arms embargo, flight bans, and asset freezes. But why do I mention those terrorist attacks? There are some controversies and alternative theories that Libya was a scapegoat and the real culprits were Iran and a Palestinian group seeking revenge for the 1988 downing of an Iranian passenger plane by the U.S. Navy. Gaddafi later also claimed that he only accepted responsibility to end Libya's isolation, not because Libya was actually guilty. Also, it seems too convenient that after the nationalizing of Libyan oil, suddenly those countries with companies kicked out of Libya are involved again in the whole terrorist attacks, now as the victims and also possessing the jurisdiction to give out verdicts and forcing Gaddafi to admit all those things. Maybe the official version is true. In this case, it was of course a mistake by Gaddafi. On the other hand, you never know with all the secret agencies operating in the background who really the responsible group is. Nonetheless, this was the first round of sanctions on Libya which got lifted, but there has been already one going on because of a total different reason. In this case, Gaddafi also gave in to better diplomatic relations, but this time, it was a major reason for his downfall. One of the reasons why North Korea holds so much onto their nuclear weapons is because they learned from history. Countries which have access to nuclear weapons are basically untouchable by military meanings, simply because of the concerns of a Third World War and a nuclear disaster. It is a powerful leverage in negotiations and is one of the reasons why, for example, in the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, nobody really officially intervenes against Russia, at least not by sending troops or actively killing their soldiers. Gaddafi understood way before those conflicts that possessing this superweapon would make him invincible, and he already followed secret plans in developing such weapons since the 1970s. Even though the results were not significant, he came very close to actually building a working prototype. Why is this important? Because of the already mentioned terrorist attacks and the involvement of Libya, sanctions and sour relations were already established for years after those attacks, but the much more significant reason was what happened in the early 2000s. 9/11 changed everything. Bush declared the war on terror and explained that countries which possess mass destruction weapons would be categorized as enemies. No matter what you think about the following events, it is a fact that Iraq under the reign of Saddam Hussein was invaded in 2003, and under the pretext that he possesses such weapons, which came out to be a lie. The country suffered tremendously and Saddam got captured and hanged. I remember myself watching the TV in the evening with my parents and watching the execution footage live on the news channel, something which burned into my eyes and what I have never forgotten. This was the message which the USA was hoping to achieve. Don't mess with us, or you will end up just like him. And they displayed it all around the world, and Gaddafi understood this message probably quite clear. America was ready to topple any leaders which they believed to be a serious threat, and with kicking USA out of the oil business, the alleged terror attacks, and the secret nuclear program, he wasn't quite the saint in the eyes of the United States, which pressured him significantly. In December 2003, Gaddafi announced to the world that Libya will end their nuclear weapons program and terminate all mass destruction weapons. He allowed international experts to inspect his factories, and it came out that, in fact, Libya never possessed functional mass destruction weapons. But the preparations were already very advanced. Libya already possessed the uranium and also the centrifuges. They were very close to actually building such weapons. Nevertheless, Gaddafi ended all those projects and also destroyed the remaining chemical weapons which were in possession of Libya. In return, the sanctions on the country got lifted. Libya was welcomed back into the global diplomatic playfield. Western countries even invested now into the Libyan oil and gas industry, and Gaddafi got praised by Berlusconi, Sarkozy, and other national leaders for his behavior. We know that this move didn't pay off in the long run. In 2011, Gaddafi was himself bombarded by NATO a second time, and paramilitary groups raided the country, this time bringing his end. Some say that because of the missing nuclear weapons, he made himself vulnerable to enemies. On the other side, the relief received after destroying this arsenal of weapons greatly benefited the country and made it possible to rise the economy again. One can say that it had very good short-term benefits, but came back years later, and he received the Saddam treatment, one which was even more brutal and longer-lasting if you consider the capture and death of Gaddafi. Gaddafi was about to make a tremendous move, something that would not change only his country, not the continent in which his country was, but would have changed the whole world and declare war on the financial system. His revolution's plan was to introduce the Gold Dinar, a currency backed by gold and completely independent of the US dollar. This way, he wanted to guarantee a real independence of whole Africa from the world and also trade his oil only in this new currency. And many say that this was the last nail in his coffin. It is one thing to be somehow involved in some terrorist attacks or building nuclear weapons somewhere in Africa. As long as you don't give off too much noise, you will maybe somehow come through with such actions. But if you publicly start to attack and challenge the global financial system, it is like a war declaration to the United States. By now you poke the bear directly in his eye, just waiting for him to finally throw himself upon you, and this is what happened. Just that you understand the significance of this idea, which Gaddafi really had back then, I need to explain to you why the US dollar is actually so powerful, and the reason for this is very simple. The United States can print money out of thin air, literally. The Federal Reserve, which controls the US money supply, can create dollars whenever needed, and the entire world accepts these dollars as real value. Now comes the key part. Oil is traded in US dollars globally. This means that any country in the world that wants to buy oil needs to first get US dollars. They have to exchange their own currency for dollars, which creates huge global demand for the US dollar. But the US itself, it doesn't need to exchange anything. It can simply print dollars and buy oil with this freshly created money. In other words, the US gets oil practically for free, while other countries have to produce and export goods to earn those dollars first. This system, known as the petrodollar system, is one of the biggest financial advantages the US has over the rest of the world. Now think for a moment what Gaddafi wanted to do. He wanted to sell his oil not in US dollars, but in gold dinars. This would have meant that countries no longer needed US dollars to buy oil. They could just use gold instead. And if more oil-producing countries had followed this idea, the demand for the US dollar would have collapsed. The US could no longer print money endlessly and buy oil for free. This was an existential threat to the financial dominance of the United States, and history shows what happens to leaders who try to challenge the petrodollar system. Look at Saddam Hussein, Hugo Chavez, or the political situation in Iran since the middle of the 2000s. This video provided you with the most significant events and key points which were responsible for different diplomatic actions against Gaddafi, some of which he was responsible for, some of which he got accused of. At the end, maybe he would have acted differently if he had known how his downfall in 2011 would have played out, and what happened to Libya after he died the same year. To this day, Libya remains in a civil war state, and sadly it doesn't seem like it would change in the near future. I really hope you enjoyed this sort of documentation with a really unusual topic. Please provide me with feedback, no matter if good or bad. I would really enjoy continuing making such videos, and especially now that I am at the beginning, I really need all the help I can get from you. Thank you very much, and thank you for your attention.
نملك سلطة شعبية نادي وتعز عليا تسأل يا رمز الحرية نحن أبناء الحرية نملك سلطة شعبية